We've reached the middle of February and we still have some cold days left. So my planting has been delayed a little bit. We do all the prep work out here to get Whirlwind Family Farm ready for the spring. We have Bermuda grass that has to be cleared out as an invasive species. We have drip lines. We have to make sure they're correct. Start getting everything ordered as far as we have a commercial organic compost that we have ordered and brought in. So there's a lot of little details and pieces that have to be in place as this garden moves forward in the spring. But as I move forward in the spring, I always think back to when I was a kid, to my grandparents. And while they have long since passed away, they were raised in a time, each and every year, they had a garden. And that kind of amazes me. Nobody had a how to book back in those days. There was, of course, no such thing as YouTube, much less the internet. It was just done generation after generation. And here's one of the things that amazes me is both sets of my grandparents on my mother's side and my father's side were raised in different parts of Texas. One was raised more in deep South Texas and the other in North Texas up in the Panhandle. And their practices for having a garden are almost identical. Sure, their methods were slightly different, but their timing and what they grew was almost exactly the same. They would raise squash and tomatoes, a little bit of corn. It was just amazing to me as a kid each year, and it was something I just took for granted. My grandmother on both sides, they would do some canning. They had all these vegetables that we would have during the summertime that would be a part of our meals, and it was just done. It was just something that they did. They were born in the early 1900s, I think 1910, 1915, somewhere in there. They were that World War II generation. Of course, their parents go back to the 1800s, and so on and so on. And I'm sure it was something that was brought from wherever these grandparents, as your grandparents, wherever they're from. It was just a part of their lives that they did every single year. So it always amazes me as someone who does a market garden and I actually have a degree in agriculture. I've gone through lots of self-taught courses and followed other various people on YouTube to hone my skills at what I do at a market garden. To them, it was just passed down and something that they did every single spring. And I will tell you, I don't know anything about, I'm not an expert on nutrition or longevity or how to live long. So let me just tell you that up front. But genetically or whatever reason it was, they had long, healthy lives. And we didn't know about smoking back then and really whether it was bad or good. We didn't know about cholesterol and all the things that we talk about today. They just lived their lives each year, and each year they had a garden, and it wasn't something that they really planned. They just did it. They knew the time of year, they knew the season, they kind of knew I promise you, if you would have gone up to either set of grandparents and asked them what is the growing zone or the hardy zone that you live in, they couldn't tell you. They didn't know. They just knew kind of when the last frost was, and they knew in the fall if they were going to plant anything, what they would plant. They just knew. So the reason I tell you that story about my grandparents is that that's something that's kind of sadly we've gotten away from in this country. There are people who still garden, but we just don't do it as part of our lives anymore. And I think that's kind of sad because at the very least, a garden, you're outside and getting exercise, even if nothing grows and does well, which I can almost guarantee you. If you put down seeds and just do the very minimal, you're going to have a harvest of some kind. Plants do tend to grow and tend to do well with just a little bit of care, water, weeding, making sure compost is down. Your garden will produce something. I can almost guarantee it, unless there's some early devastating frost, and then you can replant again. So my point being, no matter where you live, and you can always, now we have the advantage of the internet where we can look many of these things up and see how to do them. And that's why we encourage you to follow us here at Whirlwind Family Farm. Not that we have all of the growing answers or we have all the agriculture answers, but what we're going to try to do is make it simple and easy and uncomplicated as possible, so that when you do start your garden, you have an idea of what you can do and how to do it, and just make it simple. And again, doing it without a lot of expense, so that way you'll have vegetables that are really good, organic for your family, and you didn't have to pay a lot of money to get those vegetables. So thanks for following us here on the channel. Each week we're going to have several new videos as we go into spring that will talk about how to lay out, plan, and plant those gardens. So blessings over you, your family, your garden this spring. We know you're going to do great. And think about those grandparents and how each year they just did it. And they were able to have good, healthy food for their families. Talk to you soon from Whirlwind Family Farm.